More now on an annual report that shows more children in Michigan are dealing with poverty and abuse and neglect. Kids Count in Michigan shows there were more than 32,000 children who were victims of abuse or neglect in 2010, and there was a 9% rise in children living below the poverty level in the last 10 years. And it says these problems are aggravated when the state cuts prevention programs. Candace Cowling is the executive director for Family Futures. Thank you so much for joining us to talk more about this.
Thank you for the opportunity to be here.
Were you surprised when you heard about is this something that you've been seeing, or were you surprised when the numbers came out?
Unfortunately, we weren't really surprised, but anytime you see those numbers, it is cause for concern.
Right. Poverty has a tendency to lead to abuse and neglect, but is it really the poverty, or is it something more that comes out of poverty and some of the stress levels that go along with it?
That's exactly it. In terms of stress, it's really stress, and there are a variety of sources of stress, but when the economic situation is the way that it is in our state, just that stress gets exacerbated, and then those coping mechanisms that families may lack get tested even more so.
You mentioned that you weren't exactly surprised when you heard the numbers. It sort of backed up what you were already experiencing. What was that? What are you seeing in your group?
Well, we're seeing cuts in prevention services, while at the same time we're seeing more and more families that are looking for supports and services before things go terribly wrong. And so when we saw those numbers, we thought we would see an increase in poverty, obviously, with the economic conditions. And then the neglect is really the number that's causing the increase. And while poverty doesn't cause neglect, it is often associated because it's another stress, and when families don't have the tools to deal with that stress, it becomes toxic, and things just go terribly wrong sometimes.
With the prevention programs being cut, there are fewer of them. What advice do you give families when they come to you for help? What do you do?
Well, we still try to raise resources from other sources because we're fortunate in Kent County especially. We have a number of really effective prevention services. We know that when we can work with families, get into their homes and help them on a voluntary basis, we can actually stop abuse and neglect before it ever gets started.
What's some of the advice that you give when you do get into the homes? Well, how do you tackle this issue?
Well, we sit down with the families and talk with them and find out where they're at. There's so many different dynamics at play in terms of abuse and neglect, especially neglect. So we find out where they're at, and then we help them to be very intentional about how they're going to deal with all the stress that's coming their way. So if you have a baby that isn't sleeping well, that's a different set of skills than a family that's trying to find child care in order to be able to make, second or third job that they have.
And what is your advice to parents that need the help right now that maybe haven't contacted anyone yet?
Well, I would encourage them to call us, to call 211, and to reach out before it gets too bad. Prevention services, you can get in there and help families before things get so overwhelming that it's hard to find your way back.
So really, it's a call to action. Don't wait. Do something about it. There's something out there.
Everybody can benefit from some information, from some supports, and that's what we do, is we connect them with those services and supports. And there are a variety of them in this community. We're very fortunate to have those resources, at least.
Candace Cowling, the Executive Director for Family Futures, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you.
We have that information on our website as well.